Are you ready to break free from the doubts and limits holding you back? Welcome to Embrace Your Value, where therapy meets coaching to help you unlock your true worth and take control of your life.
Hi, I'm Kristen, a trauma therapist dedicated to helping you heal, break old patterns, and reclaim your power.
And I'm Jen, your support coach, here to show you how to set fierce boundaries, embrace self-compassion, and step boldly into the life you deserve.
So, whether you're stuck in self doubt or feeling lost, know this: your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to own it.
Every week, we tackle real issues that challenge, inspire, and empower you to live with purpose and confidence.
So, grab your favorite drink, take a deep breath, and let's get started.
Because you're not here to play small. It's time to embrace your value.
Hi, it's Kristen, your neighborhood therapist, and Jen and I are back today, and it's a special episode because I am going to do some interviewing with Jen so that we can get a little bit more of her information. You want to say hi, Jen, before we get started?
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. So glad you're here.
Okay, Jen, I know these stories, but I want everyone else to know them too. So let's start with the origin story. All right, like the true superhero that you are. This phrase, belief plus boundaries equals bliss, is your signature thing now. Can you take us back to the beginning? Where did it come from? And when did you realize it was more than just a catchy line?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So the whole thing around the beliefs plus boundaries equals bliss really came around because I was looking for a great way to explain what I did and how I coached. And I always saw this pattern in women that was like, they knew they needed the boundaries part, but they didn't always understand why. And they didn't always understand why they couldn't make them stick. And what I realized through my own journey, through coaching women, through just having conversations, is that when we figure out the limiting belief that keeps us stuck, then the boundaries come a little more naturally because we realize we're more than just that belief. So it's rewriting the I'm not enough. It's rewriting the I can't do this. I don't do it. It's all of those stories. And once you figure out that you are enough, you do deserve things, you can do things well, you can learn new things, then you start to realize some of your worth, some of the things that you value. And it makes wanting to set those boundaries and not let people cross them so much more powerful. So we really have to start there. And what I realized is when we get those things going, it's not just that. Like, it's not this really simple thing. It takes some time and some practice and some work, of course. But once we get that started, we start to feel happier. We start to find more joy in life. We find that bliss, that peace, that calming, that knowing that we do deserve those things. And honestly, the belief plus boundaries equals bliss came from working with a mentor of mine. And he and I were bouncing ideas back and forth. And I just kept saying, it's got to have boundaries in it. And it's got to have limiting beliefs in it. And then one of us just said, beliefs plus boundaries equals bliss. That's it. That's it. And it was just, that was a shift for me because once that came out, that was the end.
Yeah, what a great story. I love it when we just have this moment that it's, oh, this is the thing. This is the thing. So, yeah, those limiting beliefs. the word limiting is like the key there, right? Because it's like we all have beliefs, we all have limiting beliefs. We don't always lean into the beliefs that expand, that help us grow, that help us become what we want to be. This is just a great equation for let's take the beliefs that are good, that are positive about ourselves. Let's create boundaries with that. And then we can have happiness and we can have bliss. I love this. All right. Was there a moment in your own life when you saw how shifting a belief and setting a boundary completely changed how you showed up?
Oh, absolutely. I've had a ton of work that I've done around both of these things. But for me, the thing that really changed everything was when I realized how worthy and how deserving I was at keeping my own peace. I was just notorious for always letting people, not really, I don't like the phrase walk all over me, but it was, I would let them do what they wanted and I would just kind of be the peacekeeper. And what I realized was by being the peacekeeper with everyone else, I was sacrificing my own because I wasn't happy anymore. I was just like, oh, it's okay. They can do it. That's all right. And when I changed that limiting belief of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of it, to I am worthy of keeping my own peace and I am worthy of being my own self. I'm not too much. I get to be me no matter what. That shifted everything. And that made those, like I said just a minute ago, it makes those boundaries easier because now it's if it doesn't hit my values, I don't do it. So peacekeeping it doesn't mean I don't do peacekeeping. It doesn't mean that I don't want things to be calm and try to make everyone happy, because there are times when that is the best route. There are definitely times in life when we want to be the peacekeeper, especially around like family situations where it's a better outcome for everyone. And that's okay. But I get to evaluate that and I get to decide if that's really what I want and where I'm at.
Yeah. So I think something that I hear when we talk about being a peacekeeper and wanting others to be happy, what I hear a lot from people is that's selfish. What's your take on?
I don't think it's selfish. I think sometimes it's self-preservation. Sometimes we just have to let things happen and let people be themselves and not say the things we want to say in the moment because we need to keep that peace. It is okay. Just because you have a thought that goes through your head doesn't mean you have to say it. It doesn't mean you have to always be the one. If you and your spouse are fighting and you know that they're wrong, it's okay to say to them, you know what, let's just be done with this, because what they're wrong about might not be worth you being right over. So it's okay to, but see, that's where I think keeping is an okay thing versus continuing the fight and just being in the middle of it.
Yeah. Choosing your battles and when is peace better than victory? Is that what I'm hearing you say? Yes. Okay. Okay. So beliefs. You say beliefs come first in your formula. Why do you think that's the starting point? We touched on this a little bit, but this sounds like maybe your invisible driver. So let's dig deeper into that.
Yeah. Beliefs are the foundation of every choice that we make. So if you believe you're unworthy, you'll say yes when you want to say no. You'll tolerate mistreatment or overfunction to earn approval. But when that belief shifts to I matter, suddenly those boundaries aren't scary. They're necessary. So beliefs have to come first in the formula. It's funny because I actually had a discussion with a trusted colleague about this, another coach, and she was telling me that I should shift it. So when when we were talking about my one-to-one coaching, and she thought I should start with boundaries. And I was like, yeah, I see your point, but I really feel like that you can set all the boundaries in the world, but if you don't shift those limiting beliefs in there first, those boundaries are not going to stick as well. And so I'm sticking to my guns on that one and starting with limiting beliefs. I think people can probably do it different ways, but I think as far as I'm concerned, we really want to focus in on limiting beliefs. And actually, when I take clients through my one-on-one coaching program, we don't move forward to boundaries until we have figured out what they are and we have started to make shifts in them. So sometimes people don't recognize them right away and they don't understand where they came from, how deep they go. And so then it's hard to make shifts in that because you really have to identify where that limiting belief came from and why it's there.
I very much agree. And I think you said it earlier when you said that in order to figure out what the boundaries are and to make them stick, you have to have the strength in your beliefs so that you can make the appropriate boundaries and then you'll feel good about them. So you'll be more likely to enforce them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, what's one limiting belief that you see often in the women that you coach? And what's something that usually helps shift it?
Yeah, so there's several, and we've talked about unworthiness. So I'm going to bring another one in here. And that is if I say no, I'll be letting people down or people will not like me anymore. And that belief is always fueled by guilt and fear. So what we work on is exploring where that belief came from. It's usually a childhood experience or a past experience. And then we find the evidence to prove that it isn't true. So we find stories from their own lives to say, when have you told someone no, that they didn't feel let down, that they didn't get mad at you, that they did ask you to do something again? And we start building on those. And then we start to reframe it into saying no doesn't make me selfish. It makes me self-honoring. And we work on that for a while, like, where are that? And so they'll spend a couple weeks just looking for all of that evidence and finding ways to say no without feeling guilty or being fearful. And when they start to feel that, you talk a lot about feeling it in your body. And this is where they start to notice those things in their body. We look at, where does that fear come up at? Where does that guilt sit for you? And so when you start to feel that, then you can shift it and you can say that we're not going to let that in. We're not going to let that take over right now. And I'm going to just honor myself. Do I really want to do this thing? Do I really want to go with them to this event? Do I want to make this happen? Whatever that is. And so it really is a full body shift versus just a mind shift. So they then start to recognize all of that in their body, their mind, their heart, their soul, and they now know what it is they want versus just letting fear and guilt dictate everything.
Yeah, I think the alignment of mind and body really creates a strength for people so that they can hold fast in their boundaries and really start to integrate those beliefs about themselves into their everyday life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
We're talking a lot about beliefs. So how do you get people, like you talked about this a little bit just a second ago, it's probably starts in childhood, but how do you start identifying them? And then what are they quietly running their life? Do they realize it? Some people might, some people not. Speak to that for me.
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways. For me, when I started realizing that I had some limiting beliefs that were running my life, I realized it because I always had the same story pop into my mind. So I could physically see something that happened in childhood or a person from my childhood, and I could see them plain as day in my mind. And I noticed that it was always around something that I didn't feel good enough to do. So when I would get a little scared and I would think, oh, I want to try for that, or I want to do that, or I want that job, this person would always pop into my mind. And it was always the same story from our childhood. She was a childhood friend of mine. And so I start to ask questions around that. Like I have them just really evaluate, are there stories that are popping in? And if there are, then we start talking about that. Or it could be a voice that they hear in their mind, could be a certain word or phrase that a parent would use all the time. And if none of that seems to be the case, which has been a few times, we start looking at actions and thoughts, especially that are done on autopilot when they're trying to make decisions. So if they immediately worry that someone's going to be upset with them, or they immediately think, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? What are they going to say about me? What's going to happen? Then we know there's a story and we can start digging back into those things. I figured mine out just from visually seeing it, but not everybody does that. So it's different for everyone. So we really have to dig in and find that story. And we have to then find areas in our lives that prove that story wrong. So really quick, I'll tell my story. But I had a childhood friend who told me a lot that I wasn't as smart as her. I wasn't as good as her. I went to the wrong school. Everything I did was off. But we were best friends. Her mom babysat me. We were best friends. And I took that belief as to being there was something wrong with me, not anything else. And I took that belief and I held on to it for 30 some odd years. Now, I'd had little successes along the way, and I recognized that, but I never thought they were good enough. If I know Kristen 10 years ago, I'd have been like, oh, Kristen's really living her dream. She's really doing it. I'm not doing it that well. I might be doing it, but not that well. That would have been the thought that would have gone through my mind. Versus finding the true evidence to say that I am doing it. I am living my dream. I am making it happen. And so the thing that really crushed it for me was when I went back to college and got my degree successfully and with honors versus struggling through it, because I always felt like I wasn't very smart. And I would tell people I wasn't smart. I'd be like, I am very average. I am not smart. I don't learn things. I don't retain things when I read them. And honestly, that is not the truth. But I heard it so much and I lived it so much and I told myself that so much that at the time it was the truth. And so now it's not the truth. I can read something, hear it, and I can retain it and teach it back. But I didn't think I could do that. So I had to find that evidence and prove it wrong.
Yeah. The power of the mind to create positive or negative stories is actually unbelievable sometimes. Even if you hear something like you're talking about, I don't know how many times she said it, could have been 2, could have been 200, but you started just making that part of who you were.
Yes.
And then you just took that and ran with it for whatever reason. So I'm so glad that you got that figured out because you're amazing. You're welcome. Okay, great. We did a lot of good work on beliefs. Can we move on to boundaries? And let's see what you have on this, because this is also my thing. So boundaries can feel really intimidating for people, especially women. How do you help your clients redefine boundaries in a way that feels empowering instead of scary?
Yeah. And that's a great question because you're right. They are scary for women. They are intimidating. And we always think that if I set up boundaries, so this is what people come to me and they say, I can't set boundaries because they're these giant walls and they can't be torn down. They can't be changed. And I just always smile at them. And I don't really, I'm not laughing at them, but I do chuckle a little because I remember thinking that myself. But what I've learned about boundaries is that they're bridges. They're literally just guides there for you. They're not built in stone. They can be moved, they can be adjusted, they can be flexible, and they're never meant. So there's always two things that we talk about. Number one, they're never meant to control anyone, and they're not meant to shut people out. So they're meant really to let the right things in for you specifically, you, the boundary setter. So when I started setting boundaries, I was teaching people what I realized. What I realized was when I was living by my limiting belief of not being smart enough, I was teaching people how to treat me. They were treating me like I was inferior. When I started setting the boundary of I'm worthy of being smart and I am smart and I can learn things, I shifted how people treated me. And they started looking at me as more of an expert in things that I said. They started seeing me in a way that made them think I was smart, made them think that I had strength in that area. And so it really doesn't even matter how long you've been on this journey. If you've taught people for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years to treat you one way, once you make the shift, it changes pretty quickly. Those boundaries really act as self-respect, and they teach people that. And so another thing I like to say is that boundaries aren't mean. Boundaries help you clarify what you want, and they teach other people how they can treat you. And clarity is kindness.
So, Jen, great. I totally agree with everything that you're saying, right? It is about self-respect and how you see yourself and making sure that those boundaries are a reflection of what you want other people to see so that they will treat you in the way that they should, right? Like we all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, can you share it? And you gave a great example from your life. Can you share an example of a client who believed she couldn't set a boundary and what changed for her when she did?
Yeah. So I actually have a great story around this. So I have a client that I've been working with for a couple of years, off and on a little bit, and then more recently, more targeted. And we did a boundaries book study a few months ago, and I guess it was last year sometime. And she just said, it was a really good book, but I just don't know that I understand this boundaries thing. I just don't think I get it. I'm over here thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to explain boundaries to her? And we kept going on and doing our work, and we would talk about it. And she was just like, yeah, I just don't know. And so one of the things that I realized is that she wasn't quite ready. And that is a thing. So you have to also be ready and ready to do the full work around it. And so I realized she wasn't quite ready. And so that was okay. I just kept working with her in other ways and kept bringing subtle little things in. And a few weeks ago, she said to me, she sent me a message and she said, I think I get it. She said, I am no longer allowing people to just take advantage of my kindness. Kindness is a big thing for her. And she said, I am just not going to allow them to do that. I am going to really pay attention to what I'm giving my energy to and why I'm helping somebody versus just helping everybody because I feel like it's mean if I don't. So it was one of the things we would discuss a lot is she would always tell me, but I'm being mean if I don't go help them. They asked for my help. I have to help them. And I said, not if it conflicts with something that's better for you. Not if it conflicts with who you need to be and what you need to be doing in that moment. And so we just kept talking about it and it kept coming up. But she finally got it. And she said, I actually said, no, I didn't feel guilty. And she said, It was even to one of my kids. And she said, honestly, I also didn't feel like a bad mom. And that's one of the things she would also tell me is that she was a bad mom because she didn't always drop everything to save her kids. Now, her kids are all either out of high school or in high school. So it's not like they have to be saved all the time. You have a son that's in high school and you have to sometimes let them figure things out for themselves and do things. So I just was so proud and so excited for her.
I love that because I love it when the clients finally get it, right?
Yes.
Yay. It's such a great story. Okay. What we all want to achieve in some form or fashion, right? Bliss, the embodied result. So let's talk about that. What does bliss actually look like for your clients? And how do they know that they've reached it?
Yeah. And we do all want bliss. And it's a good word because I had to really think about what it meant to me when we coined the phrase. But I think for my clients, bliss looks like calm. It looks like being able to do things without having fear and guilt and shame dictate how they do it. It's when they really start choosing themselves intentionally. They are making the conscious decision to put themselves in first place versus someone else. And they don't apologize for it. If you're someone out there listening to this and you always apologize for doing something or apologize for things that aren't your fault, this is for you. Like this whole podcast is for you because that is where the whole system comes in. We tend to apologize for things that aren't our fault because we somewhere have a limiting belief that tells us we're supposed to. And we have boundaries that we are letting people walk all over. So they know my clients understand it. And when they feel it, when they see it, like this client that I was just talking about, when she knew that the way she had done it was right and she felt good about it, it was like the whole body, hell yes. She was like, this is mine. I get it. And so the question I came back to her in our chat was, do you feel in alignment with yourself? Do you finally feel comfortable in your own skin? And she said, oh yeah, in this moment, I do. Now, does that mean that she's always there? No, because we can't sustain something like that. We all have our things. But in that moment, she was living life on her own terms, and it felt so good for her.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy, right? Living life on your own terms. Because for people who struggle with this, they do always seem to be living life on other people's terms and putting everyone else before them. So there's this resentment that builds even unconsciously.
Yes.
So, I mean, you talked a little bit about this, but I'm curious, is bliss something that we arrive at, or is it something we practice daily?
Bliss is a practice. It's a way of being. Like there's no finish line where you've just arrived. Every day you get to make choices that bring you closer and closer to where you want to be. And the thing is that it's not about being perfect. So if you mess up and you say yes when you wanted to say no, you can either go back and correct it, or you can figure out how for next time you can give yourself a pause so that you can say no with a clear mind. There's always ways to evaluate. So it's all just a practice. And that's really the beautiful part of it, right? We get to it's the whole living life on our own terms. We don't have to be perfect to do that. We get to evaluate and be frustrated when we need to be frustrated and learn from it and grow and do all of the things. And that's kind of my favorite part of the whole process.
Yeah. So, what does bliss mean to you personally now that you've been living your own formula?
Yeah, I love that. And I know I said a few minutes ago that I really did have to figure out what bliss meant to me. And I think in the moment, initially, it meant just getting to be me, authenticity, which is a big part of it still. But now I think it also means peace. It means just living in alignment as much as I can and just getting to be me. No apologies necessary, just me.
Okay, Jen, I love that you were able to come to your own meaning of what bliss is to you. So, just a couple quick questions. What's a boundary you're really proud of right now?
Oh gosh, a boundary I'm really proud of right now. Sure hope she doesn't watch my podcast. No, a boundary I'm really proud of right now is I'm working on a boundaries book that I've written that we'll talk about on a future episode at some point, and really keeping my boundaries set in that so that it goes off without a hitch, so that my voice is the one that's getting out there. And I'm not letting somebody else come in and dictate how it looks or what the book looks like. So I've really been setting the boundary around keeping my voice and not just giving in on something because it is easier. We talked about that at the beginning. And sometimes that is the case. But a lot of the times it's better to just make sure you're doing your own. So I've been really proud at how well I'm doing with making sure my book is my book.
Good. Because it is your book. It's going to have your name on it
Yep.
and it's going to be your message out there. And I am so happy you've been strong about this. I know we've talked about it a few times. So love that. All right. When do you, Jen, feel the most blissed out, if you will?
This is going to sound corny and cheesy, but it is really true. And I feel the most blissed out when I have really good client calls. When my clients are doing the work, something I had to do, one other boundary I had to set was I had to stop coaching until 9 or 9:30 in the evenings because I wasn't going to bed until 2 a.m. And then I still had calls coming in at 8 o'clock in the morning and I wasn't getting enough rest because good coaching calls light me up. And they bring in all these ideas for me. And I think of things I can do for my clients. And I will make beautiful worksheets for them and different things. So I have to really stop at 8 o'clock in the evening. That is the last call I do, because otherwise I won't stop. And so that is when I really feel most blissed out. Now, if it's not working, it's travel. So I'm usually at my bliss when I'm traveling, and that's when I'm just having fun and just living the best life I've been given.
Nice. That's great. So just wrapping up, Jen, I've loved this conversation. For the woman listening who wants to try this in her own life, what's the very first step that she could take today?
The very first step she could take today is to figure out where her boundaries are being crossed and really think about why. What comes up for you? Like, go back and make a checklist of the things I talked about, because that's really how we do it. We figure out why things aren't working. And then we go back to the story that comes up or the thoughts in your mind. Who is it that's in your brain talking? Because it's not actually you. It's somebody from your past. I don't care who it is, somebody from your past somewhere. And figure out why that story exists. And then we have to find the evidence to prove it wrong. And just make yourself that checklist and start using it.
Good. Where can people go to learn more about working with the great, amazing Jen or finding out what their current belief plus boundary blocks might be?
Yeah. So you can always go to my website, which is www.thankfulheartscoaching.com. It's also linked in the show notes. Or you can find me on Facebook under Thankful Hearts Coaching. I'm also on Instagram, but that is the.jennifer.anderson. So find me at any of those places, and I'd be happy to have a conversation.
Great. Everyone, reach out to Jen if you are looking for a good roadmap for how to create bliss in your life. We appreciate all of you listening. If you ever have questions or comments, just drop us a line. We've got email. We've got email and respond to you, each one of them. And we would just love the opportunity to get some feedback from you guys. So anything that you want to tell us about yourself, also forward this to anybody who might need to hear this message.
Absolutely. And thanks for always joining us. But if you follow and subscribe, you will know every time a new episode drops. So if you're wanting more, just make sure you subscribe and that you're following us. All right. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for being here with us today.
If today's episode hit home, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Because everyone deserves to know their worth.
Next week, we're diving even deeper with more insights and tools to help you break free from limitations and live authentically.
Until then, keep raising your standards, owning your worth, and embracing your value.